God, help me to see them as you see them. God, help me to believe about them what you believe about them. And that's the biggest difference. And what he says here is that the tragedy in many people's lives is that they accept that verdict that they are not enough. There's a moral judgment placed upon them in some way, and that they've received from parents. And they accept that verdict for themselves. They believe that also about themselves. And then they spend their years exhausting themselves in pursuit of the Holy Grail of enoughness. Oh man, don't we see that all the time? Another author that I read calls it existential debt. It's this feeling that I must pay something that is lacking in my soul. And people do it in all kinds of illegitimate ways. They'll do it with sex and drugs and careers and material possessions. They'll try to fill that hole, that void of they are not enough, and try to prove that they are enough through all these kinds of invalid ways. And what they need is this sense of approval and acceptance from mom and dad. So here's the way the world looks at this. This is the way the world kind of fills that void. The way that the world brings self-worth and self-affirmation. Well, first of all, signs of success. You're good if you succeed. Right? And our kids pick up on that. Performance. Straight A's. Excelling in sports. All-star athletes. Achievements. Sometimes it's not those. Sometimes parents expect status and popularity on the part of their kids. They need to be the most popular kids in school. They need to be in the best social groups in school. Those are signs of success. And those are the things that we've often associated with self-worth. And they're invalid. Coddling is another thing. Here's the definition of coddling. It is to treat in an indulgent and overprotective way. So this is kind of the subtle difference between praising. This is not praising. Instead, it's pampering and babying and being overprotective. It's spoiling children because they don't do anything wrong. One author I read said, coddling parents want to shield their child not only from getting physically hurt, but also from disappointment from other parents, from failures at school, from problems with peers, and a litany of other potential problems and conflicts. The overprotective parent coddles when she believes that completely shielding a child from inevitable problems and disappointments is a necessary part of parenting. Subsequently, the coddled child will learn to depend upon others to rescue him or her from life's calamities, instead of having the will and the know-how to rescue themselves. See, we're afraid that our children are going to be hurt. And so we overprotect them, and we think that's affirmation. We think that's building their sense of significance, and it's not. It's an extreme that really ends up hurting our kids. Sometimes they must fall down. Sometimes they must get hurt. And then they learn how to solve those problems and to work through disappointment and hurt. Here's the other way of the world, and that is stuff. Stuff. We just buy them lots of stuff and they'll feel good about themselves. we see, I hope that nobody is in this situation. If not, I'm not really all that sorry, but so my daughter goes to Klein High School. We see 16-year-old driving brand new Lexuses, and just brand new Corvettes, just all this kind of thing. We throw stuff at their way, and I wonder where that's coming from. I know people have means to provide for their kids, and again, I'm not trying to make too big of a deal out of this, but you wonder what kind of sometimes guilt is driving that, because if we don't have a presence in their lives, sometimes what we want to do is throw stuff at them to make up for our lack of presence in their lives. They don't need stuff, they need you. They need our presence in their lives more than any kind of thing. But we don't want them to feel left out because of the status symbols of kids. And so we pour on all this stuff because every other kid has it, because we want them to feel affirmed, and they won't feel good about themselves unless they have all this stuff. All right, that's the way of the world. And here's some other ways that we confuse the search for significance. Number one, by demanding early sophistication. Sadly, children are not allowed to be children anymore. 5-year-olds have got to act like 10-year-olds. 10-year-olds have got to act like 16-year-olds. 16-year-olds have got to be 25-year-olds. We're demanding early sophistication of them and not letting them have a childhood, and that confuses their search for significance. We skip over phases of discovery in their lives and just kids being kids. Next, by degrading their feelings and actions. So when we disregard or degrade their feelings and actions, we downplay what they feel, and we say things like this. I know because I've said it. You shouldn't feel that way. So what we're essentially saying is that it's invalid for them to have an emotion. I understand about the direction of that emotion, right? That's the thing that we have to correct. But a kid feeling a certain thing is valid for that child because that's what they feel at that moment. The accuracy of that feeling you can talk about. The direction of that feeling you can talk about. You know, somebody once said, puppy love is real to the puppy. Oh, it's just puppy love. Well, it's real to the puppy. So there's a need to validate feelings and emotions that kids have and not just dismiss them or downplay them or disregard them, but then direct it. So a child will say, well, I'm really angry. That's not a bad thing. If you can get your child to admit a feeling like that, that's a good thing to do. I'm really angry. Okay, I understand that you're angry. It's okay that you have this feeling of anger, but it's not okay for you to act like that when you have that feeling of anger. So when we allow them to express their feelings and we help them understand their actions tied to those feelings, then it helps them in this process of discovering their worth and their value. And then the last thing is this, by invalidating their interests, passions, and desires. Again, this is kind of a subtle thing that we can do, right? We have expectations of what they should become and what they should do. So you have a kid who has just these inherent desires for art, but you want him to be a football player. Or, they have desires for basketball, but you want them to be a musician. Years ago, I've told this story before, and by the way, if I've told these stories and you've heard them, please forgive me. But we have new folks in. But years ago, we took Ryan down to NASA, and on the way back from NASA, I was just pumped about being an astronaut. I was thinking, oh man, it's so cool, and I was in the spacesuits and all the stuff down there. It's just a guy's paradise. And I'm driving back, and I'm having these fantasies about Ryan being an astronaut, that kind of thing. And so I said to Ryan, so Ryan, after today, do you want to be an astronaut? He said, no, I want to be a toy maker. It's like we just blew $100, But no, so it's about just validating, their interests and their passions and their desires. We'll talk about this more as we go along, but the job of parenting is discovery. Kids are discovering, and we are discovering with them. We're helping them discover, and we're also discovering what they should be and what they should do. By not doing these things, we confuse the search for significance. Now, let me share with you this graph, because this has been really helpful to me over the years. There are two parts of our lives, and these are going to speak to the whole issue of affirmation. Two parts of our lives, and we all kind of exist in relationship to these two parts of our lives. There is, first of all, our being. That is the sense of who we are. This is what we might say is identity. It's who we are. It's consistently who we are. It's the deepest part of our lives, being. We operate from that. And then here's the other side of that, doing. Doing. So the ideal here is that what we do should flow from who we are. And getting that in the right order is really important. Because many in life are getting their sense of being and their identity, they're defining it by the things that they do. And that can be really dangerous because the things that we do disappoint. The things that we do go away. So somebody might say to me, well, who are you? And I would say, well, I'm a pastor. That's not really true as far as who I am. Pastoring is something that I do. It flows from who I am. But what happens when at pastoring you have a really bad day? What does that do to your sense of self? See, your identity should be based upon something that's much more consistent and much more stable and secure than the things that we do in life. But people define themselves through the sense of achievements and through success that they have in the things that they do, and that's really dangerous. Because things we do, again, disappoint. And some of them go away. What happens when I retire? I'm not a pastor anymore. What about my sense of self at that point? What about my identity? See, there's something that should be deeper. And yet at the same time, while doing should never define who we are, it certainly enhances and it builds up who we are. I mean, it's powerful. Because when you can connect these two things, and this is the goal for our kids, is a sense of understanding of who they are, and then from that, they are doing the things that are really consistent with who they are, then you've got twin engines going. And it's a real blessing in life to be able to do both. Not everybody gets to do that. But when you can, it's really wonderful. So if kids can figure out who they are, we can give them this sense of self, and really God has to give them to it. I mean, we can do our very best, but it's got to come from the Lord. Then they can go about in life searching to do the things that are really consistent with their most deeply held values and with the sense of who they are, so they're not violating themselves. And what I'm trying to say to you is that affirmation is found in both being and doing. And we need to address both of those when it comes to our children. This is what often parents do. Parents address the being thing. You're my child. I unconditionally love you. I praise you. Nothing will ever change that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a really good thing. The problem is that we don't often connect that sense of self to what they are doing in life, which means we then excuse the doing part. And because we kind of go around the doing, no matter what the kids do, we say, you're loved, you're valued, you're okay, you can never do wrong. What I'll say to you is that's dangerous. Because now we're going on the extreme of coddling, where it's flattery without really any substance. So I have said to my kids before on occasion, what you're doing is not consistent with who I know you to be. And it's not acceptable. I know that this is who you are. And so we've had many conversations, particularly during the teenage years, about how does that get expressed in the things that you do. I never want kids to do because of public image. I never want kids to do because they're pastor's children. One of the great things about the Brook is our kids have never felt pressure. Thank you for that. They have never felt this thing, you're a pastor's kid. You need to act a certain way. You need to behave a certain way. It's just people have not done that with them. We as a family have gotten to be ourselves. It's been a big blessing. For our kids to be raised in our church in the slimmest of times, I mean, when we had no children's ministry, for them to grow up in this setting has been such a blessing. And I really think that that's been a key to where they are now. But you have to be the best you that I know you are. See, you're minimizing and compromising the you that I know. Well, I'm just being myself. Well, I'm sorry, you can't walk out the door looking like that just because that's yourself. Well, I don't want to be a fake. Well, that's not the best you. And we're going to expect you to be the best you, not the worst you. Right? So it is connecting the things that they're doing in life, and it's the same thing with grades and sports and those kinds of things. We say to them, you're not going to quit something that you started. You're going to persevere through it. So be careful, make the right choice. But once we begin this, we're going to follow through. Who you are is related to how well you work at your grades. We've always said you don't have to have straight A's. You do not have to have straight A's. You are expected to do your very best. And then we're going to trust. And so we have questions about, did you do your best? Here's this grade here. Did you do your best? And what happens, folks, what we've seen is that it has given our kids some freedom to want to do their best rather than do their best because mom and dad are making them or demanding them. And all of them have been really, really good students. I'm thankful for that. But part of this art of parenting is just figuring out there are moments when you have to let go. You have to make statements that are clear, but you have to navigate through times of letting them connect the things they're doing to who they are, and that changes what they're doing. It helps them in what they're doing, but it also builds who they are. Both of those are important. Here's the point. If we praise our children only for what they do, they learn that love must be earned. And some of you grew up in environments like that, where if you made a B, you should have made an A. If you made an A, you should have made an A+. I had one guy tell me that he caught 2 touchdowns in one football game. But the thing that his dad pointed out after the football game was the one pass that he missed. So this performance-based kind of mindset, and I'm telling you, that flows from your heart. It's about what's in here that you are demanding this from your kids. So if we praise them only for what they do, success, performance, they learn that love must be earned. Some of you grew up in an environment where love must be earned. You had to perform in order to get attention and acceptance and approval. But on the other hand, if we praise our children only for who they learn that nothing must be earned. So the world's going to talk about the first one a lot. The world is going to talk about don't praise your children for the things that they do. The world is going to talk about praising your children basically for who they are without any expectations toward that. I understand the heart of that, okay? But what I want to say to you is that leads to some very unhealthy things about children not being willing to give their very best in life. Because when they achieve, listen, this is really important. Part of esteem is achieving. It is working your tail off to achieve something of value that you worked for and that you earned. And that is a part of self-esteem. Now, it should never get ahead of the other. But what I want to encourage us to do is to think about the other two, is to have expectations based upon the sense of self and how kids define themselves, and that those be healthy expectations, right expectations, expectations from the proper motivation, but nonetheless expectations. Because kids, think about it, you guys know this to be true. You felt really good about yourself when you have worked really hard to achieve something of value and you did it. And that's what, my wife's a kindergarten teacher in a public school. I don't know how she does it. Because kids are so coddled without any expectations. Kids are just not told no. And there's no expectations about the things that they do based upon, again, who they are. So does that make sense? Okay, I hope so. Sometimes I feel like I'm, talking to myself here. So convincing myself. So both are necessary. Being on one hand, they are a child of God, created with purpose and loved unconditionally by God and by you as their parent. So the message here is be true to who you are. The best you, be it. You are a child of God. Nothing will ever change that. So we say to our kids, and I've said to my kids, nothing that you could ever do will cause me to love you more. And nothing that you could ever do will cause me to love you less. Nothing. You're my child. But at the same time, you have been shaped by God for a purpose. You have been made to do something in this world that connects to the heart of God. It's going to bring great significance to your life. a sense of meaning. So you've been given precious gifts and abilities by God, that He has a wonderful plan for your life. There is something to do in life that will help bring affirmation to you and worth to you. So use your gifts. Be responsible. Pursue God's purpose for you with all your heart. Now, I mentioned to you Psalm 139, where David writes this beautiful psalm. You ought to read it tonight. It'll help you get a real good grasp of this great sense of self as made in the image of God. David says, "You knit me together in my mother's womb. You ordained the days for me." And then he says, "I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well." Years ago, I was looking really closely at this. And I thought about, well, what is the whole thing of identity, this deepest sense of self? So character is who we are. Identity is the sense of who we are. We're able to step back from our lives and make judgments about ourselves. God has given us that amazing ability, and that's where identity lies. It's a sense of self that I have about me. And so what are the parts of that? Well, if you look at this phrase carefully, this verse carefully, you'll see it. First of all, identity is found in knowledge. David said, "I am fearfully and wonderfully made." So the goal for us, the goal for our children is this question: do I know who I am? Do you know who you are? So part of our parenting is to help them to know who they are. Now remember, first and foremost, they are a child of God, and they are your child. Okay? Valued and treasured just for that at a very base level. Do you know who you are? Do I know who I am? Worth is the second thing. Identity is stable when I celebrate who I am. David said, "Wonderful are your works." He was talking about his own creation. Wonderful are your works, God. David was relishing in this reality. I've been created by God, that I'm not an accident from a cesspool billions of years ago. I've been created by a loving Creator. And I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And we need to push into that more. We need to celebrate that more. We need to acknowledge our gifts. We need to acknowledge our uniqueness. You guys are 10s in God's eyes. I mean, we're all 10s in some way, right? So celebrating who I am. And then here's the last part of that, though. Security. Being secure in who I am. David said, "My soul knows it very well." Life beats a sense of self out of us. And so if we have a level of security, what we're able to do then is to endure hardships, to stay consistent with who we are, not compromise ourselves when tough times come. So we want kids to know who they are. We want kids to celebrate who they are, keeping that in perspective, right? But then also we want them to be secure in who they are. Those are the goals. Now, let me share with you some key points as we close, and I want to give you a couple of practical things that we've done in our family, and then if we have time, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, we can take a couple of questions, or maybe you've got some comments. Here's some key points to remember. Affirmation is not the same as flattery or building self-esteem. We're talking about something much more healthy than flattery or building self-esteem. And here's what I mean by that. The desired effect of affirmation is that our kids will see the goodness of God within themselves. Here's a really important thing. It is to make much of God, not too much of our kids. Because without the God factor, kids become the center of the universe. And they begin to think that they're the center of the universe. And we begin to feed that message to them by the way that we respond. It's to make much of God within them, not too much of them. Be specific with affirmation. Tell them what you see in them and how it makes you feel. My son Brandon just made a really good decision 3 or 4 days ago. And so I texted him and I say, "One of the things I'm most proud in you is that you seem to always make really good, wise, mature decisions." And it makes me feel good, He could just sense that. So tell them specifically what you see and how that makes you feel. Look at your children when you affirm them. Eye contact. Any of you notice how poor eye contact is with children and teenagers in today's world? Part of it is because we don't make good eye contact. Don't look people in the eye and say things to them. So look at your children face to face. One of the things that Kaylee and I did last summer is we went to this adventure camp, a father-daughter adventure camp. And there were certain father-daughter exercises that we walked through. We had devotions in the morning, and we had activities in the afternoon, ropes courses, whitewater rafting, hiking, all kinds of crazy fun stuff. But every once in a while, they would have an exercise between fathers and daughters. And one of the biggest ones, really, it was kind of the culmination one at the end of the week, was we had to sit and look at each other for 2 minutes without speaking. You ever tried to do that? It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. And so here we are, we're sitting on 2 rocks out in the woods, and we're face to face, and we're looking at each other. And at first, she giggles a little bit, and I giggle a little bit. We're still trying to keep eye contact right. And then after a while, and they know this to be true because they've done this kind of stuff for years, you begin to really see each other. We don't really see each other. We don't see behind the eyes into the heart. And we began to see each other, and she began tearing up. And she wrote me later and said, I saw in that experience how much you really loved me. I could see it in you. And it was a really difficult thing to do. But those kind of deep spiritual and emotional connections with your children are really important. And when you affirm them, you speak to them, you look them in the eyes like that, the subconscious signal comes through that really helps them to understand how much you love them. Be truthful in your affirmations. This is where we have to be really careful because we flatter. Don't tell them something that both you and your child know aren't true, right? We want to build them up, so we'll say things that are a little bit dishonest about them. And the problem is that they won't have accurate estimations of themselves. Our goal is to know who they are, right? For them to know who they are. We want that to be an accurate understanding. And by the way, they also won't believe you in time. And if they won't believe you about that, they won't believe you about other things. Sometimes we have to praise the potential good or the smallest steps of improvement. Right? It is speaking what you see in them so that they can become that. Thomas Jefferson said, call a man brave and you help him become so. You see things in them that they may not see in themselves. If you speak to that, and sometimes when you got a lot of really bad behavior going on or you're going through a season with them, you speak to the potential good and really small steps of improvement. Don't couple affirmation with a criticism. Try to separate those. Because a lot of times the only thing the kids will remember is the criticism part. I had somebody tell me just 3 or 4 days ago that the only time that her parents told her that that they loved her was right before they gave her a spanking. And I thought how sad that is. The only time, never told it to her any time except right before giving her a spanking. So try to separate those things. Affirming in the presence of others multiplies the effect. Okay? Affirming in the presence of others multiplies the effect. Now, there's a section I think we may have missed, and that's okay because we'll come back to it when I'm able to be back in front of you again. But it's about Jesus and his security and who he was. And in Matthew chapter 3, verse 17, you remember the story? It's the story where John the Baptist is baptizing Jesus there in the Jordan River at the beginning of his ministry. And there at the beginning of Jesus' 3-year ministry, he's baptized in the Jordan River by John the Baptist, and a voice from heaven is heard. You remember what that voice said? What did the Father in heaven say? Yeah, this is my beloved Son. Modern translation would say, this is my Son whom I love. In him I'm well pleased. Think about the power of that for Jesus in connection with his Father. Jesus being fully God, but also being fully human, having great cravings within himself to be approved by his Father. And there, when he would begin his public ministry, a loud public voice from heaven saying, "This is my boy. In him I'm well pleased." I think the meaning of that. So, honest public affirmation multiplies the effect. They hear you saying things about them to others, and that's meaningful to them. Let them hear you affirm them in your prayers. Pray with them, but in your prayers, pray for them and about them to God, affirming their character in your prayers. Be intentional and on the lookout for things to affirm. Right? Boy, life is busy. And here's what happens. It's about do this and don't do that and get off of that and sit down and eat your food and don't bend your brother that way and all those kinds of things. It's do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, and that tends to be the substance of life. And what can happen is that we begin to have this harsh and critical spirit where it's always about correcting, and there's never real opportunities to affirm and to say the things that are important that they need to hear. And then thus the subconscious things, because when it's always about do this, don't do this, then the subconscious message is we are not enough. And I just don't measure up in my mom's eyes. I just don't measure up in my dad's eyes. I'm not good enough for them. So, boy, kids get that naturally. I think the world pushes them that way. It's our job to make sure that we help them with the other. And then have your children affirm each other. Expect it and demand it at times. Have your children affirm each other. And then they learn to be affirming types of people, seeing the positive. All right, let me just share with you a few things that we do. I should have said a few things we do, because once I made the list, it was more than a couple. I've told you this story before, and again, if you're new, I'm almost reluctant to say it because I've told our church over the years about this. So when the kids were younger, I would be in their bed with them before bedtime, and I would say to them, Ryan, line up all the boys in the whole world. Who would I choose to be my son? And he would say, you would choose me. I said, you're right. I would choose you to be my son, no matter. All the boys, I'd choose you. And then we kept doing that on and off for a few years. Probably we stopped about 9 years old or so. But when he was about 8 years old, I asked him that one question one night, and he paused and he said, I said, Ryan, line up all the boys in the whole world. Who would I choose to be my son? And he said, Dad, what if one of them was smarter? I said, I'd choose you. He said, what if one of them played basketball better? I said, I'd choose you. He said, okay. And then we just went on, prayed. But he was thinking. He finally got the point of the message, that I would choose you. So you steal that, okay? You just use that. You don't even have to say, Pastor Mike did this. You just do that with your kids. Impress them. Have them think that you came up with that by yourself. If your spouse is not here, that was your idea, okay? So you just do that. That's a wonderful thing to tell your kids is, I would choose you. Out of all the kids in the whole world, I would choose you to be my son, to be my daughter. We've done Sunday night with Dad for years and years. We've done it with all three of the kids. During the summers, we do it every week. And then Kaylee and I have done it more consistently, almost every week. And it's basically that we go to Sonic, read the Bible. She'll tell me about her quiet times. I would do Bible studies with the boys on Sunday nights at different times. Kayla and I last week went for a walk around the neighborhood. The weather's been so nice. We just said, let's go for a walk. So we went for a walk, and we just talked the whole time. And I'm just listening, right? And I loved it. I just loved it. Her just telling me stuff and me getting asked questions while we were walking. And then we came back. We sat on the back porch, and we prayed for each other. Spending time with your kids like that is so important. New Year's Eve, every New Year's Eve, we have a family time where we get together And we do different things. And we have done goals. We have done letters of affirmation to each other. I've got a few of them up here. I grabbed a few of these from over the years. We've done letters of affirmation to each other. So here's one from Brandon to Ryan. This is 2010. Thanks for always challenging me to do better. This is younger brother to older brother. And for having so much faith in me that you tell people at the gym, you can just give him the ball because he's going to make the free throw. And let me drive you around on a daily basis. That's when he was first learning to drive and stuff. We've shared a lot of laughs together, and I'm glad I've gotten to see you grow up so much over the past few years. I love you. And then, here's one from Kaylee. You're a great brother. I'm glad I can say that you're my big brother. You're smart, funny, you have good taste in music, you don't act crazy or say bad words to me. I know you'll always protect me if I need you to. Thank you for being nice when you didn't have to and putting up with me when I'm in a grumpy mood or going crazy. Your little sis, Kaylee. So these are all special things. And the New Year's, before Ryan was to go off to school, it got really emotional. And we have those little breakthroughs. But here's what I want to say to you is that despite the spontaneity of life, sometimes moments need to be planned. And you can't make things happen, but you can provide a context for things to happen. And so every New Year's Eve, we just try to sit down and talk about the new year, and we do letters of affirmation. This past year, I gave them an assignment to talk about 2 or 3 big moments in their life that was either hard or really, really good. And, man, it was awesome. And we had a tear-filled, prayer-filled night on New Year's Eve with the kids. So it's really good. So set aside time with intention. It takes some planning, and the kids are going to want to do other things, but you've got to call them together. And then here's another thing I would say is rite of passage trip. When your kids get to be 14, 15 years old, the Jews had this stuff down. They would have a bar mitzvah, right? We've lost ceremonial rites of passage in our culture where kids are just adults. And we don't allow them to be kids and then let them transition into adulthood. So what I've done with all 3 of the kids is I've taken them away for a rite of passage trip. It's the big trip where they are moving from being a teenager into a young adult. And we celebrate that and we talk about it a lot, but a great opportunity for you guys is a place called J.H. Ranch. And it's father-son, father-daughter adventure camps. They also have mother-daughter, mother-son things that are going on too. Most of the time it's father-daughter, father-son things. And you do these activities, you do devotions, you do worship at night. And they have college kids that coach the kids and lead them in devotions as well. In fact, Brandon is going to do that this next summer. He's going to go and volunteer his whole summer and work there at J.H. Ranch because it made such an impact upon him. So looking your kids in the eye, having some experience, right? This was what was powerful about the bar mitzvah. Having some experience where in their minds, and toward the end of the week, I've said it with all 3 of them, now I don't want to have the same relationship with you from this point on. Okay? I don't want to walk over you. I want to walk with you. And I'm still your dad, but I want us to push into us becoming friends and to validate that. And we talk about it, and we have wonderful experiences up there. With each one of the kids, we give them a promise ring. It could be a necklace, could be a ring, whatever it is. They make a commitment to remain sexually pure until marriage. We'll talk about that more as we get later into it, but those are the kinds of experiences that help kind of validate the transitions that the kids are going through. So a rite of passage thing is really cool, and it lets them feel like they're growing up, and I think it gives a sense of affirmation to them. Okay? So again, here's the big question. Let me just reiterate it. What do you see in them? That's what I want you to go away with tonight. What do you see in them? What you see is what they will believe about themselves. So if you can change your heart, you can change your mind, you can change your vision of the kid, guess what's going to happen in a very natural and organic way? They're going to begin receiving the messages about themselves that you love them. And that's the most important thing to work on and to pray about. Okay? All right. 2 minutes for questions, comments, any kind of insights, any practical things that you guys have done that you've felt really helped in the affirmation thing. Yes, Tricia. Oh, he did. That's awesome. Trevor did that? That is very sweet. Brandon, he was a little harder. Because one time he said, "But Dad, you'd have to choose me. Because I'm your son." So he was thinking. That's good. Any questions? All right. It's going to be a fun ride. Let's pray together. And then you're dismissed. Father, thank you. We praise you for this great gift. There is no more noble, no more exciting, no more profound opportunity and responsibility as being a parent. We just love it. And we thank you, God, that we can be used by you. We get so much joy out of these kids. And yet, God, it can be so challenging. It brings out the best and the worst in us. And I pray for these parents, God. Give them strength. Provide for them every resource that they need. And help them, Father, to see their children as you see them. Change their hearts, change our minds. And then, God, we can trust you with the outcomes of that. We'll do the things that are necessary, but mostly it's just about seeing and believing in who they are and as defined by you. So, Lord, bless in every way, provide in every way, protect in every way. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you all. Thank you.